Hello, this is Bilal, your economic instructor, and today we are going to solve some MCQs for inflation for O levels. So, this would brush up your topic analysis and theories. So, let's get started. Okay, so the first question is, who is most likely to benefit during a period of inflation? So, we all know that whenever there is inflation, fixed income earners do not benefit because their purchasing power falls. And the people who hold cash also do not benefit because the cash that they hold loses its value, meaning purchasing power. So the answer is likely to be A or B. Let's look at an example. For example, A lends money to B $100 today, and B returns $100 after the year, and there was inflation. Now B returned $100, but the purchasing power was less. Hence, B, who borrowed the money, was at an advantage, and A, who lended the money, was not at an advantage because he gave $100 with a higher purchasing power and received 100 with a lower purchasing power because of inflation. So who would benefit? The borrower would benefit and the lender would not benefit. Okay, second MCQ. What is always indicated by an increase in consumer price index, which is your CPI? Now, CPI shows inflation. So whenever the CPI is increasing, this means that there is inflation. An increase in government spending in an economy. So it's not necessary that the government spending would increase. An increase in living standards. Now that is also not necessary because if there is inflation, things are getting expensive. It's not necessary that the standard of living would increase. An increase in the average cost of living. Well, this is the right answer because now everything is expensive. Now living life becomes more expensive. An increase in the purchasing power. Incorrect. It's a fall in the purchasing power. The third MCQ. Now this is a tricky one. When would an increase in aggregate demand be least likely to result in inflation in an economy? Now the aggregate demand is increasing. It would cause demand pull inflation, but when would it not cause inflation? When it is the result of an increase in government spending? Well, this would increase the aggregate demand, hence creating inflation. So this cannot be the answer. When it is the result of an increase in expenditure on consumer goods, which basically means consumer expenditure, this would also increase your aggregate demand, hence causing inflation. So this cannot be the answer. When there are substantial unemployed resources in the economy. Now this is a concept that we're going to study later in economic growth. So when there are unemployed resources, this means that the aggregate demand has decreased. Now when the aggregate demand is increasing and then decreases, it might just set off and there might be no inflation. So that is why this would be the right answer. When there is a substantial increase in expenditures on imports. So what this basically means, the net exports X minus M has decreased because the imports have increased. The import is a negative value and it has increased. So overall the aggregate demand would fall. Now C and D both supposedly are right, but the issue is that D is an incomplete information. We don't have what happened to the exports. Whereas C explicitly states that the aggregate demand is decreasing. Whenever there is unemployment of resources, this means that the aggregate demand is has fallen. All right. So that is why D cannot be the right answer. Well, D is a bit correct as well. It's just wrong on the basis that it is incomplete. We don't know what has happened to the other components of the aggregate demand. Hence, this is incorrect. All right. Fourth, why is weight used in the CPI? Now, weights are used in the CPI to show the proportion of income that is being spent on that particular category. So that is the basic reason. Let's look at the options. To ensure that all items in the index are treated equally. They're not treated equally. Well, to be very honest, You might be spending more on food, less on leisure, so then they're not treated equally. To ensure all price changes are included in the index, well, all price indexes are usually included in the index, so that's not an option. To ensure that the index includes changes in the quantity consumed, well, that is also incorrect. To ensure that the index reflects the spending pattern, how much of our income are we spending on a particular good, that is what weights show us. That's the basic definition. Now the way I explained it was in easy English. Now this is how, a student would be manipulated by asking it in a different style. To ensure that the index reflects spending pattern, what does this mean? How much we are spending on food, how much we are spending on leisure, so that is the concept. Okay. 5. An economy is experiencing a sustained fall in the general price level, which means that the economy has deflation. Okay, spelling is incorrect. Which term is used to describe this? Okay, I just wrote the answer as deflation. All right, let's move on. The table shows the consumer price index of an economy. What can be concluded from the data? Now, this is what we have already done before. Let me just solve this one. Now, this is the CPI, which means that there was an inflation of 1%, and we need to calculate the inflation if required. Let's look at the option, we'll get to know. The prices fell between year 4 and year 5. The CPI has decreased. Well, when the CPI decreases, it means that the prices have fallen. Let's look at the other option. Okay. The prices rose in every year. Now, let me just be very clear on this. Now, we need to compare it with year 1. So we had 1% inflation, we have 4% inflation, 8% inflation, and 6% inflation. So what this basically table is showing, compared to the first year, we are having inflation of 1, 4, 8, and 6% respectively. Now every year there is a positive inflation, which means that the prices are increasing. They're increasing at a faster rate in year 3, more faster rate at year 4, and at a slower rate at year 5. So prices did not fall in year 4 and year 5. Rather, the prices increased at a slower rate. So this is incorrect. B is correct because every year the prices are rising, the CPI is increasing. Right? The rate of inflation rose in year 4. The rate of inflation rose in year 4. Sorry, the rate of inflation rose 5% in year 4. Well, it's not 5%, it's around 4%, so that is confusing. There was a fall in living standard by year 5. There was a fall in living standard in all of the years, not in year 5 alone, because every year there is inflation, the purchasing power is falling, so every year the standard of living is decreasing if the incomes are not increasing. So this is incorrect. So B is the right answer. Let's move on to the next one. 7. The table shows some data about an economy, rate of inflation, change in personal income. So the incomes are increasing by 2.5%, and the inflation is increasing by 3.5%, which means that the purchasing power is falling by 3.5% and the compensation is by 2.5%, which means that the real income after adjusting for inflation has decreased. Now, both prices and real income fell. Now, the real income did fall, but the prices are increasing. So this is incorrect. Both prices and real incomes rose. Now, this is incorrect because the real incomes fell. The prices fell, but the real income rose. Now, we know this is incorrect because the prices are increasing because inflation is positive. And the prices rose but the real income fell. This is the right answer, right? I hope this gives you an idea of real income as well, right? What can be concluded what is concluded in the construction of consumer price index? All right. A base year? Yes, it is. Incomes? No, income is not included. PED and quantity supplied are also not included. Base year is included. So this was a relatively very easy MCQ. Oh, okay. The graph shows what happened to the rate of inflation in Chad for the period from March to December. Okay. So from March, it remained same till April, then decreased negative. It stayed negative, and then it increased in December. Okay. Which statement about the general price level in Chad over this period is correct? It was highest in March. Well, this is incorrect. It was highest in April. If we look at this point, April, we had inflation of 3% in April. So we can say that the prices were highest in April. Now, if a product was 100 rupees in March, now it is 103 rupees in April. And then the prices fell. It was negative. So I don't think A is the right answer. It was lowest in October. No, no. October, the prices were negative. That is correct, which means the prices were decreasing. But in November, they further decreased by a smaller proportion, but they still decreased. So this is incorrect. It was lowest in December. Well, this can be the right answer because the prices are continuously falling. May they fall 3%, June they fell by more than 1%, July more than 2%. The prices are continuously falling, and December was the last month when it fell, and in January it then increased by 1%. So December has the lowest rate of lowest price levels. It was unchanged between March and April. Well, this is also incorrect because March we discussed is 100 and April the prices are 103. All right, so let's move on. And this MCQ is a bit difficult, right? And I can assure you, because it's so confusing, the examiner has removed this from the paper. All right, so just to give you an example, such MCQs are not actually tested. They're quite complex. You might see them in AS level, but this is a bit complex, and it's a bit difficult to identify an answer, especially for a student. All right, if you got this right, kudos. See, it's removed. Okay, the data shows the consumer price index and an index of money wages in an economy during 4 years. Right, so let's look at the options. Which statement is not correct? Okay, is not correct. Now this is the key thing, right? Inflation was greatest between year 3 and year 4. Well, yes, because the rate of inflation increased by 3% and then 5%. So this is correct. The real wages remain constant between year 1 and year 2. Well, let's look at the options, year 1 and year 2. Now the income increased by 2% and the inflation increased by 2%. So the purchasing power fell by 2% and was compensated by an increase in the income by 2%. So the purchasing power remained the same, and we can say the real income remained the same. So this is correct. The real wage rose between year 3 and year 4. Now, year 3 and year 4, the inflation was 5% and the incomes increased by 3%. So the income increased by 3% and the inflation increased by 5%. So the purchasing power fell by 5% and was compensated by an increase in income of 3%, which means that the real income fell. So it did not increase. So this is incorrect, and we are looking for the incorrect option. Hence, C is the right answer. The rate of inflation increased over the whole period, initially 2%, 3%, and then 5%, which is also correct. Under which circumstances would the rate of inflation be most likely to fall? Government spending increases. Now, this will increase aggregate demand, and society's marginal propensity to save fall. Now, what is marginal propensity to save? Just to make it a bit easy, this means that they're saving less. When they're saving less, which means that they're going to spend more. So this is going to increase the aggregate demand and cause inflation. Reduce interest rates will increase inflation, and consumer increasing their spending, consumer expenditure is increasing, aggregate demand will increase. The government increases direct taxes. Oh, this will reduce their incomes, they'll spend less, aggregate demand would fall, and the level of investment falls. So this would it decrease the aggregate demand? This should be the right answer. The price of imported raw material rises. This would cause imported inflation. Hence, this is also incorrect. What is likely to happen when a country is experiencing deflation? Consumers would delay spending. This is what I have given an example in class as well. So this is the right answer, and we can skip the rest, right? The table shows the CPI for selected cities for August 2015 relative to New York, USA at 100. Okay, so now this is the CPI and we are comparing it to the USA. USA is supposedly 100. So this means that Geneva, Switzerland is more expensive, Oslo, Norway is expensive, and all of these countries, cities are less expensive than New York, all right? What can be concluded from the table? Geneva had the highest average price level. Well, not the highest price level, but the highest inflation, that can be said. Let's look at other options before we decide it's A or not. Living standards were highest in Lima. Well, the standard of living is not only connected to the cheapness or low inflation, but also the income. So this is definitely not the answer. Singapore was more expensive than Oslo. Now, this should not be the answer because I'll explain A and C together. The annual rate of inflation was same in Istanbul and Johannesburg. Yes, because it's 48 and 48. So this is the right answer. Now, why A and C are incorrect? I'll give you an example. What this basically means that Geneva has an inflation of 37%. The product, which was $100, now is $137. Now, this does not indicate that it's more expensive compared to USA or less expensive compared to USA. In USA, the same product might be 150 last year and it's now 150 this year as well. So the inflation remained the same. Hence, we cannot conclude on this option that whether the products are more expensive or less expensive. In January 2016, the rate of inflation in a country changed from 3% to 2%. In March 2016, the rate of inflation was 4%. What happened to the price level in January and March? Now, because the rate of inflation is positive, this means that the price levels increase. And in March, it was also positive. This means that it also increased. Hence, the answer is D. Now, this is a critical concept. If the inflation rate is decreasing, this means that the prices are increasing at a slower rate. That's the important concept that you need to keep in mind. Okay, the final MCQ for the day. Venezuela is a leading world oil producer, has experienced hyperinflation of 400 per annum in recent year. How does hyperinflation affect the economy? So hyperinflation, prices rise very rapidly. And Money has limited worth as a medium of exchange. Hence, people would convert their currency into foreign currencies. So that is the concept. D is the right answer. I really hope you got all of them correct. Until next time, see you soon.